So, welcome to our third episode of our all new podcast, Tokenizing Everything. Today I'm here with Jan Mundin, Managing Director of Disrupt Network. Hello, Jan. How are you?
Hi, doing well. How are you?
I'm good too. Thank you. Nice to have you, someone that has such a tremendous experience throughout the space of technology. Um, yeah, and hello to all the people that are watching us live. First of all, before we start, I have to mention that everything that's mentioned today is solely the opinions of personal attendees and not does not reflect any opinion of Amazing Blocks or Disrupt Network. So thank you. Let's begin with just a brief intro about yourself, Jan. Can you maybe give our listeners a brief intro, who you are, what you do, and how you got into technology?
All right, yeah, sure. So I got into tech after studying business at WHU in Germany because for my very first venture, I couldn't find a CTO. So me and my co-founder just said, well, let's do it ourselves. And that's how I kind of got into teaching myself programming, which was sort of a foundation for understanding blockchain later on. And so 3 years later, I got into blockchain. It was 2017, a good year to like the year when probably most of us got into it because it was the first time it got really, really big. And obviously via crypto, via trading. And yeah, today, one of the projects I'm doing is Disrupt Network. What we do is we do sort of build communities around deep tech topics. So blockchain is one of them, but we also deal with AI, IoT, and other things. And basically, the idea is to have lots of community meetups happening and the occasional big conference where we have sponsors as well, like Deloitte or PwC and so on.
Okay, yeah, it sounds very interesting. I think, especially in technologies like blockchain, it's crucial, to have a community in place, to really foster mainstream adoption. So,
Mm.
let's continue with blockchain a bit and your personal experience with it. What was your first moment that really, kind of, a wow moment that people always reflect to? And I always ask my guests this question because it's always interesting to see what was this one moment that defined basically their path to joining the blockchain space full time.
Yeah, yeah. So in 2017, I was in India in Asia, and I would say the first time it really struck me as like, okay, this is far superior to everything else. Wasn't really the investment case because obviously that's what I found interesting short term. But what really struck me in the bigger picture was being able to send money cross border very easily. And in Asia, it's not like in Europe where everyone has a SEPA bank account and you can just use an IBAN. Everyone knows how to do it. Every country has its own combination of bank number and account number and some other numbers that you need to type into some interface, and then it takes forever for money to transfer. Obviously, this is getting better over time, like TransferWise and so on are great services. But back then, I was really amazed by how fast you can send money to someone who's in another country. And yeah, that was probably the first time I was like, okay, this is a profound advantage that I can only see here.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important here that also people are educated, obviously, on how to leverage this technology. And I think education, especially, is one of the core pain points probably in the blockchain and tokenization space, as people do not really grasp the potential, the concept, and the technology behind it. So, people that are familiar with blockchain and are considered kind of experts in their respective communities always get this question, how do they what is blockchain basically? So when someone addresses you, and you as with this strong community platform that you have, obviously,
Mm.
marketing blockchain is one of the core elements of your daily business. And therefore, how do you bring blockchain to non-technical or non-blockchain people in general?
Yeah. I think it really depends a bit on the context. Like for once on the time, like what I found extremely helpful in explaining blockchain, if you have like a 3 minute time span, is the example of sum of digits, Quersumme in German. So if you want to explain hashes, which is a really fundamental part of blockchain technology, then that's something very helpful. Because if you understand hashes, then it's understandable how these blocks get made and how they interlink and why it's so hard to reverse this. I mean, at the core is this like unreversibility of a hash. at least now that we don't have quantum computers. But that's another discussion. If it's more short term, I tend to use a use case that this person would understand. So if it's an investor, then it's always good to remind them of the kind of returns that are possible. If it's someone else, then, like, for example, if it's someone who works with a lot of international people, like someone who has remote freelancers in the Philippines or India or wherever, then just pitch them the different speeds of transaction. I don't think that everyone needs to understand the core technology behind it. I think there are a lot of people working with blockchain who don't fundamentally understand it, and so it's usually not my point to explain it in depth. But if I should or feel like I should, then the sum of digits is usually helpful. How do you do that? I think it's a very interesting question.
Yeah, that's for me personally, what I realized, and I heard this from Dr. Ben Bertzel. He's the co-founder of SingularityNet, and also by France Robotics. He's a huge AI enthusiast, I would say, or evangelist, basically. And what he said is just the core basic principle to really people that do not get the concept is a decentralized Excel spreadsheet, just like this, like an example. And I think with this, people kind of at least get a little sense as to what blockchain is, and then obviously you continue building on top of it. But this to me is like the basic explanation in terms of what it, or a distributed ledger system at least is. And on top of this, then you can go to the more detailed explanations like smart contracts and so on. But for me, this is like the foundation of my explanation. So from your experience, with Disrupt Network, what kind of tools do you consider as the most effective, in terms of leveraging, a marketing effect in the blockchain space, and what is really, to you or from you based on your profound experience, the most successful tool to really educate people in this space?
You mean on a one-on-one basis? What would I recommend someone, or on like a societal level?
Just generally, if I'm a blockchain startup and I want to have, I want to kind of address people, or I see people as like potential clients that are not familiar with the blockchain space, but I want to, kind of bring the value of blockchain into their business model.
Yeah. I think in that abstract sense, I think in the personal sense, buying Bitcoins is a great way to start and get emotionally invested and kind of suck up all the information you come across. I think from a startup perspective, it's very helpful to make the advantages very obvious and not dive too much into the tech. I think the tech should be explained at a later stage when someone says, okay, I'm listening because you're pitching me being twice as fast or twice as cheap or whatever you're pitching, and then you can dive into the technicalities. And I find sometimes people start with the tech, and the tech is amazing. The tech is the thing that makes these advantages possible. But for most people, the pitch needs to be reversed, and they need to first see what great results can be achieved. And then maybe they're interested in hearing some of the tech part, but maybe they're not even interested in it, right? So that should be done later.
Yeah, I think it's the same as the internet. I mentioned before in another podcast that people really, they want to see the benefits, but not necessarily find out how it works. One of another core pain point in the blockchain, or especially the tokenization space, is standardization. So there's the educational gap on the one hand, but also standardization on the other, which is really lacking. And I think in order to have an actual token economy, as people like me in the tokenization space always like to refer to and market, it's important that we achieve standardization. So what you are interesting approaches in terms of standardizing the tokenization space?
So, I mean, I'm part of the International Token Standardization Association, short ITSA. And I think the vision there is pretty cool to say, look, we need better ways of identifying tokens, especially if we have this explosion in the tokenization segment, especially if we have non-fungible tokens. And I think the easiest way to explain why this really matters is, I'm sure most people who are in blockchain did or do trade. is the confusion about the Bitcoin short codes. Like, on some platforms it's XBT, on others it's BTX, on others it's BTC, and then you have all these like Bitcoin Cash and so on, which makes it even more confusing. And there's a genuine worry, and I'm sure this has happened thousands of times, that people did buy the wrong thing or sent the wrong currency to someone, and that's a real pain point. And it gets worse as there are more assets on the blockchain. And it gets worse as there are more blockchains to choose from, more tokens to choose from. Because back in 2016, when there were only like 3-4 that the average person would really use, it was easier. But now it gets exponentially harder as there's exponential growth in options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think
this one framework that standardizes the identification is really helpful.
Yeah. I heard the item. Also, even like at Amazing Blocks, we also obviously tokenized our own equity in Liechtenstein, and we were also assigned a unique item by ITSA. So it has really helped us, foster a standardized approach in terms of our own tokens, which are currently though privately held, so it doesn't really affect us that much as of now. But in the future, I think, especially when a lot of tokenization projects will find their way to Liechtenstein and generally tokenize themselves, I think can be a great way to kind of bring more people to the space, as it's much easier to identify the respective assets, and kind of find your way into the tokenization space without having to kind of go through all the different spaces that no one really understands if you're not familiar with the blockchain space. So to you, in terms of the blockchain space, standardization is currently evolving. But do you believe that, especially, there's a lot of organizations in the blockchain space that market themselves as the next big thing? Obviously, a lot of scams as well out there that promise to be the next big ecosystem in a standardized way. So how do you see, these kind of promises as a way that harm the blockchain space in terms of fostering mainstream adoption? Or do you think it's also sometimes helpful to be a bit controversial and brag about the potential that this technology can inherit?
I think in terms of crypto, some of these ICO news that got into mainstream media weren't that helpful in making people trust in this. But I mean, there's also the flip side, right? I think there's also this interesting pitch of like the ICO craze has enabled a lot of new people that were not very powerful or rich previously to accumulate money and kind of flood a new tech space with resources that weren't there before. So I'm not really sure if I'm part of the standard position of all this over promising is extremely bad. I think it has severe negative side effects, but I think in the end the core benefits is what matters. And I don't like if the core benefits don't shine through because some other guy did something bad, then maybe they're not that crucial.
No, I agree with you. You have to find the balance basically between promising and delivering.
Absolutely.
And so you mentioned a good point there, how people that may not have had the financial needs or means before, and kind of gained financial inclusion through the crypto and blockchain space. So what do you think, or what role will tokenization play in terms of also onboarding the unbanked community and their respective resources to a token economy and a globalized ecosystem of tokenized assets?
Yeah, I think this is extremely interesting. I'm very passionate about this buzzword, I would say, democratizing finance. I did an internship years back at Grameen Bank, Bangladesh, which is like micro loans in Bangladesh, extremely powerful company that has alleviated a lot of people out of poverty by giving access to capital. And I think this is a great use case. I mean, people there, they buy a chicken with a $10 loan and they pay 20% interest rate every year. And yet this is still something that wins the Nobel Peace Prize for its efforts in alleviating poverty. So they're great use cases where it's just win-win-win for everybody, and that is great. But I think a lot of crypto projects alone would help there. I think in tokenization, what I find interesting is if you look at, for example, democratizing finance in developed countries like Germany, especially. Germany has like a shareholder percentage of, I think, 7%. Like 7% of Germans own shares. And that's really, really sad, because shares are the way that people can, be part of what the future is going to be like, because corporations are extremely powerful, but it's not really the CEO that is in power, it's the owners, right? And so the shareholders are in power, and anybody could become a shareholder, but nobody does in Germany. If you look at UK, they're already at like 14%, and I looked this up recently for a discussion, and the US is at like 55%. So far, far ahead. And I think one part of that is that it's still not super easy. So I have the hopes that this is one specific use case where tokenization could really make some profound changes.
Yeah, it's a great point that you mentioned there, because I think one of what's probably, or maybe in Germany, harming this growth in that space is, on the one hand, that people kind of like to save money, obviously, and do not trust the volatility of the stock market. So do you think when tokenizing, for instance, assets that actually have an intrinsic value to them, or emotional value, basically like a classic car that they like, or a painting, do you think that this will kind of change the way people see wealth and store wealth, in terms of not having it on their bank account and getting like a barely any interest rate, but in the future, obviously, they will be able to invest in their dream car, their dream painting, and therefore find a great way to kind of also participate in the capital markets? And do you think that tokenization will be the key here?
Yeah, I think this is a huge changer. Like, for example, if you want to, there are lots of great startups outside the blockchain scene that are trying to make things a little bit more accessible. Like there's vinovest.com, and that where you can buy expensive wines and they store them for you. And there are a few others where you can buy famous art pieces and so on. But they're all like not really that accessible. Like, for example, I forgot the name, but there's one that allows you to buy parts of famous paintings, but the minimum buy-in is like $10,000. So that isn't really the way for like one painting on one platform. It's a very specific investment. That isn't really the way you're going to get 80% of, let's say, Germans in that case, or Europeans to buy into these ideas, right? But the more we get to, where crypto is right now, where you can, you have $50 lying around, you can go ahead and buy a piece of a Bitcoin and a piece of an asset that is growing. If that were possible with a lot more assets, I think there would be a lot more people who would use that, from wines to cars to real estate and so on.
Yeah, no, this is definitely true, that tokenization, especially legally compliant tokenization, where you can actually tokenize the ownership, is the key here. And also, there's a lot of jurisdictions that are approaching this the right way. So what, from a jurisdictional standpoint, to you personally, what do you think needs to happen in Germany to really, from the regulators, to really foster a token economy?
I think you're the better expert to ask for that question.
This is true.
I mean, you have some specific reasons for being in Liechtenstein, right?
Yeah, that is true. Like, because obviously in Germany you can tokenize debt or participation in income and losses, however, not the actual equity and ownership. And I just wanted to kind of get like a neutral perspective, but I guess you're right that the Liechtenstein jurisdiction is probably a great role model for other regulators like Germany, or let's say the EU, maybe, that will dictate the narrative here in the future. So let's continue a bit with tokenization and blockchain. Obviously, tokenization and blockchain are great and very interesting sectors, but obviously they will not just exist alone. They will coexist with other, emerging trends as well. So at Disrupt Network, you guys also focus on other trends such as artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and so on. So
Yeah.
how do you see in the future these technologies kind of combining, and or do you see them combining at all? And what influence will, for instance, tokenization have on AI, on IoT, and vice versa?
I think the biggest factor here is the development of more like entirely digital assets or digital goods or whatever. Because I think one key challenge for blockchain is this switch we just spoke about, the legal aspects, this switch between this connect between the real world, like the physical house standing there, and the blockchain, and how that happens. So the more things are digitalized, things like rare collectibles and online games that are just digital, you don't need to build that bridge. So I think that is a very interesting factor. So global GDP is growing, and a part of that is going to be, ever larger part is going to be entirely digital, and that part is, I think, extremely easy to tokenize. So I think that's a big driver. And apart from that, of course, I think other developments like IoT could help with that bridge as well. Like the more advanced IoT software is, and the more affordable, the more things can be tracked through independent trackers, and that then act as an oracle for the blockchain.
Yeah, yeah, no, oracles are a great innovation that you mentioned to kind of bridge the real world with the digital world.
Yeah.
So let's dive a bit deeper into this. Like when you tokenize, for instance, a machine, that is, let's say, connected to other machines as well, and producing, let's say, a wood panel, for instance.
Mm.
Um, and then you implement a pay-per-use system as well. Do you think
Yeah.
that this will basically be a major driver in terms of also fostering innovation and IoT implementation, maybe even because now with tokenization, more investors and especially also retail investors can join this market, and therefore more capital will flow into this?
Mm. So the other way around, like the reverse than the previous question. Basically, what other things will be advanced because
Mhm.
blockchain advances, or specifically
Yeah.
tokenization? Yeah, I think the world as a whole, even, I think it's very interesting to look at, okay, what things are possible if markets get more liquid and more investors join that market. Um, you could say, okay, if you have this machine and there's more, there's a bigger pool of investors that could buy shares in it,
Mhm.
that's a great thing to finance a machine, and it makes it easier, but it will also drive down the price of it, right? So surely there will be more ways, like IoT will advance, but also a lot of other things will advance because it's more easy to fund them. So it could be very diverse. It could be co-living, could be
Mhm.
much more easy because the prime people to do co-living are rather young, and the prime people who can do real estate, which you need for co-living, are rather old. And bridging that gap could also be tokenizing real estate, right?
Mhm. Yeah, like then we get back to this earlier mentioned point of us that, like, the financial inclusion, that
Yeah.
tokenization will bring to our society. So in terms of the tokenization space, um like you mentioned, you were in Southeast Asia, you traveled, you worked there. So what effects do you think will tokenization have on, or what impact will tokenization have on these regions?
Yeah. I mean, now it gets a bit political. I think some governments are doing a very bad job at providing the citizens with certain services that governments are supposed to give them, like stability, and tokenization, just like crypto, could be a way that these people can sort of fight back by choosing an alternative. So instead of relying on the Zimbabwean land registry, they might use a more reputable global blockchain, or the same could apply for most things. I just see the big danger of if you're kind of competing with the stability that government should give, that the governments are not going to like it that much. So I think it's going to be interesting how to get around there, because they do have switches on the internet, right? Like
Yeah.
I think recently Nigeria switched off WhatsApp for a few
Hmm.
days. So I think it's always tricky
Yeah.
manage that balance between innovation, but also not too much at once, because then they'll get scared.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Because basically, just generally blockchain and the digital world can kind of, jettison borders.
Yeah,
It will create a globalized community, not only in terms of messaging or chatting, but also in terms of exchanging value. And
yeah.
I think this is definitely one of the core principles or effects here. So,
Mm.
you talked about Nigeria, and Nigeria is or could be considered a blockchain hub. And I also recently read that, for instance, Mauritius is a
Yeah.
very forward oriented community or legislator in this space. So how do you think this will affect maybe the continent of Africa as a whole, the tokenization space? Will it maybe enable them to kind of have their own power of their resources again and be able to communicate it or exchange it and trade it throughout the entire global market?
I wouldn't like specify this on like one continent. I would just in general say, yeah, I think inducing more freedom is helpful, because I
Mhm.
think free markets tend to be good at making most people happy that can be made happy. But I think this applies to Europe just as well. I mean, the amount of things that are illegal here that people want to do is much less. But if you look at certain political organizations like WikiLeaks,
Mhm.
they run into trouble. Like, you can argue whether they're right or wrong, but I think you could make the case that there is some good in having them around. And there was a time when Visa and Mastercard just blocked any payments to WikiLeaks, and then Bitcoin was very vital in supporting that. So I think that freedom allows a lot more people to transact. And obviously, in other countries, there's more use cases. Like, for example, in India, it's extremely hard to export rupees, like out of India. Like, sending money abroad is tricky. So there, that's already a use case where payments to other countries is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it will just generally create a very dynamic
Yeah.
globalized economy.
Yeah, and
Um,
it will even up countries a little bit more. Like, the
mhm,
more accessible it is for someone in the Philippines to work for an American company, the less different the world will be, right? Like, I think
yeah.
in many ways, um, the barriers are government created.
Mhm,
The barrier, like the differences between let's say rich and poor, to stick
mhm,
with these
yeah. Yeah.
buzzwords
Yeah,
terms.
yeah, no, definitely. This is one of the major benefits. It's the decentralized aspect that blockchain as a whole inherits and has on our
Yeah,
society, that we can skip intermediaries and skip fees and have just everybody has public access to the same resources. And
yeah.
this is the core principle, and also what, for instance, got me into the blockchain space. Um,
Mm.
so yeah,
Would you say that you're generally also interested in all regions, or do you have a European focus because of Liechtenstein?
in terms of amazing blocks, obviously our headquarters is in Liechtenstein.
Yeah,
However, the benefit of Liechtenstein as a jurisdiction is, for instance, that you can have EU passporting. So therefore, from a foreign perspective, equity that is tokenized or generally ownership and any asset basically is considered a normal security from a foreign
mm.
perspective. And I think this will as a first step, obviously enable the entire European market, the European economic area of Europe, to be onboarded to the tokenization space or the token economy, so to say. And in the future, obviously, we also see interest from Asia, from the US, for instance. So we are not really focused on single market.
Mm.
Obviously, our ecosystem is around Liechtenstein and in Germany, especially the financial hub of Frankfurt as of now, and also a bit Berlin, where you live.
Yeah.
But on top of this, I think we want to really leverage this international aspect, that tokenization and blockchain has, and therefore we do not see any barriers in terms of tapping into other markets if regulators obviously allow it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So
That's
this
always
is
the
this is a core issue and topic there.
yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, one last question that I always like to ask my guests as well is just out of the blue, where do you see blockchain and tokenization in 10 years? And I know it's hard to make any specific prediction, but just out of your personal opinion, how do you depict the token economy of the future?
I think what makes this prediction so difficult is because it's, especially in terms of tokenization, it's very linked to very few government decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So it could very easily be that, you know, if very large countries like the US would suddenly have legislator even more advanced than what you have in Liechtenstein, then, you know, this can happen very fast. But if everyone goes backwards and gets even more restricted on what can be tokenized and all these things, then you know, the next 10 years might not see as much growth. So I think that's kind of the crucial point. So I think it's very tricky to make predictions there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I would certainly hope, again, democratizing finance, that everybody has like 5 apps on their phone or 10 apps on their phone, where you know, instead of just having money on your bank account, you just, you know, waiting for the bus, you just buy some asset that you find interesting, and I hope that this is as diverse as possible, because then everyone can benefit from things that today are only accessible to very few.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that was a good closing word, Jan. So maybe you can make your prediction in the blockchain or crypto prediction markets as well, and participate there. A little joke here on the side, but anyway,
I
it
think
was
prediction
great.
marks are interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, they are, and then they sometimes do predict, you know, the future a bit better than the traditional poll system. Yeah, another great use case for blockchain that we discovered in the final word. So anyway, it was great to have you here today, and to have your insight also from another perspective, because it's always interesting, you know, to have different perspectives detailing the tokenization and blockchain space as a whole. So yeah, I really enjoyed having you here, and hope to have you back soon. And enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Likewise.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. And to our listeners, thank you for joining this podcast or this live stream today, and to anyone that's listening remotely also, thank you for listening. And if you want to get in touch with what Amazing Box is doing, to find out more, then feel free to visit our website or connect with me in LinkedIn, send me an email. The information is always below the video or here on this screen. So thank you, and see you on the next episode.